00:15 a.m. Even the desert wind was asleep. A single line appeared on the mission console in Diego Garcia. Sentinel net green. The RQ-180 Sentinel received clearance for takeoff. The wing joint glowed with graphite coating that absorbed the moonlight, then blended into the darkness. As it climbed to 50,000 feet, the MX-20 HD infrared optical module beneath the belly began peeling back the Saʻda mountains layer by layer. Thermal imaging ramps X-rayed the basalt, marking reactor stacks and vent ports with cherry red spots. The scanner completed a full cycle in 4 seconds with a 640 Hz refresh rate. Red spots represented active heat sources. Dark blue spots represented passive rock piles. At the same time, the Emisaad cybercell injected the Trillium-9 Trojan into Sanaa's backbone. The code was only 11 kilobytes long, but it added an 8-millisecond delay to the scan line on the radar screen, slowing the operator's reflexes like muscles dipped in liquid nitrogen. The second virus package was cloned to the Houthi and Taiz data nodes. The 3-point delay chain made the radar interpretation look like an image stabilizer, and no one sounded the alarm. In Djibouti, the hangar doors of the SOC-45 opened. 4 B-2 Spirit aircraft glided onto the runway like shadowed silhouettes. The fuselage and wings are a single piece of carbon composite. Radar wave reflectivity is 0.0001 square meters. The exhaust ducts are serpentine-shaped, dispersing heat across the surface to equalize the IR signature with the surrounding air, while engine exhaust blends into the sky. Each aircraft is equipped with a GBU-57A/B massive ordnance penetrator in its belly, 6.2 meters in length, 0.8 meters in diameter. Total mass, 13,121 kilograms. The front section is made of tungsten alloy armor with a strength of 1,850 megapascals. The steel body behind it contains 2,730 kilograms of PBXN-114 explosive, equivalent to 18 tons of TNT. Descent speed, 330 meters per second. Penetration depth in soil, rock, and concrete, mixture 60 to 75 meters. Explosion moment 3,000 degrees Celsius plasma, 10,000 psi pressure. Under these conditions, the water content of the human body instantly vaporizes and protein chains are carbonized. Empty cells, GBU-31, JDAM, 2,000-pound steel body GPS guided circular deviation 3 meters. GBU-38 JDAM, 500 pounds, designed for precise structural destruction. GBU-39 SDB, 250 pounds, narrow door opening explosion, minimum shrapnel. AGM-158B JASSM ER-970 kilograms, radar invisible, 900 kilometer range, thermobaric wave. The payload table was full. The Spirits reached a takeoff weight of 163 tons. Runway friction increased by 20 knots, but with a wing area of 460 square meters, the takeoff distance remained at 2,000 meters. In the Pentagon's Blue Room, the LED map opened at 6K resolution. 8 primary, 16 secondary, and 36 micro-targets lit up as red dots. The president was not at the briefing. General Curtis R. Harlan leaned forward of the screen, his lips moving, the microphone muted. "The night is long, the strike is short." This sentence reached the flight director 4,000 miles away via the HF burst protocol. The approval signal lit up in the code chain. At 0135, the RQ-180 completed its second scan. The mobile generator convoy around the ramp signaled active on the cable tension. Active ramp equals live threat. The green corridor rule was activated. The Spirits prioritized weapon selection to MOP plus JDAM. At 0152, the B-2 crew donned their oxygen masks. The radio switched to EMCON Alpha. Communication with the outside world was silenced, and the cabin pressure dropped to 5.6 psi. The global logistics network did not even flinch at that moment. The only sound was the ear-splitting pressure of the pilot's heartbeats. 2 a.m. Spirit 1 entered the Red Sea, kept its engines at 78% power, and stabilized at an altitude of 45,000 feet. The weapon door opened like a giant iris, releasing 13 tons of GBU-57 into the air. It was as quiet as a vacuum pump, with no wind whistling. Gravity pulled the bomb down. The JMPS Block 3 flight computer made micro-adjustments to the winglets, and the ballistic deviation was reduced to less than 0.5 degrees. 36 kilometers behind, Spirit 2, 3, and 4 repeated the same maneuver. 4 giant steel bullets locked onto the north, east, south, and west corner nodes of the Houthi main network. As soon as the B-2 doors closed, a rain of GBU-31/38 and SDB began. Program: MOP will impact, causing the rock to crack with the initial shock. 2.2 seconds later, the JDAM casing will arrive, widening the crack. 4 seconds later, the SDB swarm will enter the internal voids, creating a shock echo and slicing the tunnel network like lace. The RQ-180 Sentinel laser rangefinder plotted the fall cone of each bomb. The inertial plus GPS solution was reinforced with an ELORAN backup signal, and ionospheric deviation was zeroed. 2:17 a.m. Saʻda main command room, walls covered with Iranian-made A3 Duo composite armor plates, ceiling made of Russian Beton 12 concrete mix, 1.2 meters thick. 11 Houthi commanders, including Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps officer Al-Razi, were bent over a pocket map on the table. The tungsten nose penetrated the ceiling without melting. First meter. Concrete was poured. Sound remained below 40 decibels. 10th meter. Armor steel sizzled. Temperature reached 900 degrees Celsius. 52nd meter. The hard basalt layer cracked with a high-pitched sound. 62nd meter. The trigger circuit ignited. Explosion. 3,000 degrees Celsius plasma. 10,000 pounds per square inch pressure. The air inside the room expanded in 0.5 milliseconds. The walls collapsed inward under vacuum, and the steel beams melted like slices of cheese, turning into red foam. Protein, calcium, copper, plastic, all were reduced to microparticles and adhered to a 3-meter-wide cavity. The commander's metal buttons turned into graphite dust, and the digital map projector melted into glass. No dust particles were detected in the outer concrete structure. The radar reported green, and the siren fell silent. The warning was silence, followed by an explosion. Saʻda's brain was extinguished in 5 seconds.
0:25 a.m.
5 GBU-31s fell in succession from the tail compartment of the B-2's TRW-221. Each weighed 910 kilograms. The blind corridor was cut at a 68-degree angle, and the concrete was more than 3.4 meters deep. The explosion created 8 bar of pressure. The 800 degrees Celsius temperature caused the oxygen to expand suddenly. The steel doors exploded like dominoes, and the floor turned into a piece of charcoal. The low-frequency shock at 31 Hz shattered the inner ear bones. 5 guards who entered lost their hearing and collapsed due to loss of balance. East Gallery, Spirit 2/SDB attack. A swarm of GBU-39 SDBs entered through the narrow door using a cluster dive algorithm. A 0.7 kilogram AFX-757 explosive charge detonated behind the wall, generating an internal pressure of 180 decibels that shattered the eardrums. The tunnel walls turned into graphite dust. Wooden support beams burned in their own smoke. South Escape Corridor, Spirit 3/J ASSMER. The AGM-158B radar-evading missile approached at 50 meters altitude. The iris cover opened in front of the target, and a thermobaric fuel cloud erupted. A micro-delayed igniter mixture ignited. It consumed 21% of the oxygen in 0.9 seconds, vacuuming the combustion air system at 1,000 degrees Celsius and turning the corridor into a fire hose. North Air Shaft, Spirit 4/GBU-31. 2,000-pound JDAMs tore through the steel mesh grating, filling the shaft with debris. Carbon monoxide levels rose to 7,300 parts per million. A person loses consciousness in 3 minutes, and the heart stops in 5 minutes. Houthi radar collapse. The Soviet P-18 team saw ghost echoes on the screen. The signal increased by 40 decibels, and the real target's outline disappeared. The operator shouted, 240 to 120, still nothing. Upper command had already been buried, and there was no one left to authorize fire. 3:05. The RQ-180 reported on the infrared screen that the heat traces of the Fajr 6 ramps had turned gray. The hydraulic pistons ran out of oil, the diesel generator couldn't find fuel, and the ramp's electronic brain displayed soft fault 88. Spirit 3 targeted the Marib oil storage facility with the remaining JDAMs.
The first bomb penetrated the steel shell in 4 milliseconds, and the 1000 degrees Celsius heat caused the tank dome to swell like a mushroom cap.
When the internal pressure reached 5 bar, the second wave came, and the oxygen explosion created a red firebowl 300 meters in diameter. As the raw fuel burned in the air, the mixture of benzene and toluene turned into a column of black smoke, shattering the windows of a village 4 kilometers away. The internal logistics line was cut. Without fuel, the rockets were nothing but metal rods. Tahama drones. The truck ramps launched 60 Shahed 136. The iron beam laser battery in Djibouti pulled the supercapacitor to 1.6 megawatts. 1064 nanometer wavelength, 3.5 centimeters focal point, 1000 degrees Celsius heat. The plastic body melted in the first second. The explosive warhead's autopilot circuits were severed, and the drone fell into the water. The radar mistook it for rain interference. The Houthi operator heard not a single click in his headset. The psycho-tactical blow was as harsh as gunfire. Hodeidah artillery. A 35mm Oerlikon rained down tracer bullets with night vision, but there were no targets left to hit in the sky, and the tracer line faded into darkness.
Kale 3:37 mani.
Sana'a underground power room. The backup Mitsubishi 18 generators were out of fuel, and the oil pressure sensor read 0. The control panel went black. The Cyber Viper mirror server redirected all radio traffic to a black box in Delaware. The Houthis argued with their own echoes in their headsets. One officer said, "The airspace is clear," and another replied, "But it shook like an earthquake." When the chain of command breaks down, even the most reliable missile becomes a log. Time opens up while people wait for orders. 4:12 a.m. Third timestamp. Kayam ballistic missiles received their launch orders from underground silos. Concrete casings cracked, and 6-ton cylinders rose on columns of flame. The parabolic trajectory was drawn toward the heart of the Red Sea. The target was the American tanker fleet. The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower's SPY-6 radar detected a bright line at 4 gigahertz.
The Aegis combat system classified the threat in 0.05 seconds under C++ baseline 10 code and fired the SM-6 Block YA. The solid fuel rocket climbed at 4G acceleration, reaching Mach 3.5. The seeker head switched to active semi-active radar mode, guiding the Kayam into the kill vehicle collision window.
Impact. Kinetic energy of 8 megajoules. A 30-kilogram tungsten particle warhead tore through the Kayam's hull, dispersing an aluminum cloud into the stratosphere. The Djibouti THAAD battery struck the remaining debris in the upper layer. The nuclear chemical warhead was destroyed by a hit-to-kill kinetic shock before it could detonate. 2 missiles remained. One experienced stabilization loss over the Red Sea, with a gyroscope malfunction causing a +4-degree deviation. The warhead safety pin broke, and the missile self-destructed in mid-air. Silver particles rained down into the water. The other struck a fuel tank near the coast of Djibouti. The steel hull turned bluish-white at 1000 degrees Celsius, and a 200-meter column of smoke rose into the sky like a tulip. 2 American contractors with surface burns and respiratory injuries were transported to an ambulance module. Pentagon spokesman: "Even the most advanced shield cannot guarantee 0 casualties." The press room forgot the sound of pens. 4:40 a.m. Brent crude oil broke the $128 per barrel mark. The insurance broker's screen showed a 325% increase in the Bab el-Mandeb passage premium. Tanker companies returned to the Cape of Good Hope route, extending the voyage by 12 days, with with additional fuel costs of $750,000. The ripple effect extended to airline tickets, cargo freight, and food shelves. Saudi Aramco announced that it would increase production by 1 million barrels per day, but without tankers, the oil would remain in the wells. Energy charts from Jakarta to London flashed red.
Kale 5:33.
The sun rose. The sky was not foggy, but covered with smoke smelling of burnt hydrocarbons. In the triangle of Saʻda, Marib, and Alba, the ground was still red, but the radar was still clear. The Houthis' chain of command had effectively broken down. The surviving officers fled to the mountain passes, but there were no telegraph lines. The RQ-180 glided over the Red Sea again, measuring the crater depth with a laser rangefinder. Minimum 28 meters, maximum 72 meters.
This means the underground lung had been torn out. The tunnel network was now a lifeless void.
The Spirit fleet reached the 1/3 fuel mark and entered the return route. The chemical reactor chimneys were still 200 degrees Celsius inside, but production was over forever. Kale Arumani. Critical results. 80% of the long-range ramps are ash. The remaining 20% are out of fuel, with faulty electronic modules.
The chemical reactor cores have turned into crystalline cracks. Operational restart will take 9 months, which is an eternity in wartime.
2/3 of underground command centers are destroyed. Backup VHF network cannot synchronize. Orders are fragmented. Field units are disorganized. The straight filtering 10% of oil supply is at risk. $34 million in volatility within 24 hours. The UN Security Council convened an emergency session. Russia called it an imperialist attack. China warned of unpredictable consequences. And France-Germany demanded a humanitarian corridor. Iranian cells staged a light missile boat display in the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. Fifth Fleet raised the alert level to orange, and oil prices neared the $131 per barrel mark. The Houthis whispered, "Valley of Vengeance" on the radio, but the ramp was unplugged. The bunker-busting mop had severed the nerve endings of the brain. The Crimson Vortex was a modern war fought with code, lasers, and 13 tons of steel, without a boot being planted on the ground. It was not boots but mathematics, not noise but silence, not a division but an algorithm that triumphed.
But the question remains, is this coup a window to peace, or the first thunderclap of a bigger storm?
Write your thoughts in the comments. If you found this work valuable, like it, share it, subscribe, because the Middle East chessboard has already carved its next move into the sky.